The prospect of potentially watching LeBron James play with his son in the NBA is something that's dominated the news for a good part of the last 5 to 6 years, at least. Bronny's been making the headlines ever since he started dribbling in the driveway, and it isn't a secret that the king wants to play with the prince at least once before he retires for good. But is it possible, and how could it happen? First up, can LeBron and the Lakers make it happen? LeBron James is one of the greatest players of all time. His legacy is such that even at 37, the Lakers can't move him on because he's still their best chance of winning another championship. He's averaged over 30 points per game in the Lakers' worst season in years, and it seems that he's aging like fine wine at the moment. LeBron might not be close to retirement, but that doesn't mean the rest of the world isn't moving at its natural pace, because his son Bronny James is close to becoming an NBA prospect and could get snapped up by a franchise soon enough. And at the moment, we'd be willing to bet that the Lakers have the best chances of signing Bronny. Yeah, it's crazy because he hasn't even entered the draft yet and wouldn't enter for another couple of years, and still, we're talking about the Lakers potentially signing LeBron. But that's because he's a unique talent, and he's been hyped up throughout his childhood and teenage, and it's not surprising to see him being hyped enough to find a pathway to the NBA. Plus, the likes of the Lakers and many other franchises would know that signing Bronny means getting LeBron with the deal, and there aren't better 2-in-1 deals even at Costco. And that's why we think the Lakers would love to have Bronny, because it means that LeBron gets to retire in LA, something that Rob Pelinka recently revealed that he wanted to happen. Secondly, can LeBron play in the NBA long enough? That is the ultimate question, isn't it? We're lucky to be in the era when super athletes are still dominating most sports. Tom Brady is set to enter another season of the NFL aged 45, and he still looks good. Rafael Nadal has been winning Grand Slams aged 35. Similarly, LeBron seems to be dominating the sport, and he's 37 already. We've talked about it earlier, but it's insane to say the least. His 30 points per game this season is easily the best ever at that age in the league history, and the second best by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at 38 years old was around 23.4 points in 1985. However, things aren't perfect for the king. His struggles with injuries have only grown in the last few years. Compare that to the earlier part of his career, you'd realize that the alarm bells are certainly ringing, even if they aren't that loud. James missed 71 games in 15 seasons for the Cavs and the Heat, but so far with the Lakers, he's already been sidelined with injuries for 80 games in 4 seasons. At the same time, he's been experiencing another thing that LeBron never experienced before: losses. LeBron-led teams aren't used to missing out on the postseason and managed to qualify for 13 straight seasons from 2006 to 2018, but somehow he's missed out on the playoffs twice in 4 seasons with the Lakers already. All this indicates that LeBron's certainly slowing down, but given just how great his peak has been, we've still got some time before he can be considered human, and we think he's got it in him to be around until 2025 when he gets the chance to team up with Bronny. But is Bronny an NBA-level player? Compared to the certainty of LeBron being around and almost at the peak of his powers come 2025, the chances of Bronny making it to the NBA are somewhat slim. There's definitely a pathway to the NBA, but he's certainly not a surefire superstar, and it's almost unfair to keep calling him that. No one deserves to have that much pressure, and while no one's doubting his quality, let's be honest, he's not got an insane physique like his father, and he's definitely not a ball-dominant scorer. He was ranked 19th in the 247 Sports composite rankings as a 6'2" sophomore in 2020, but over the next 2 years, his ranking has fallen to 43rd. This isn't to say that he hasn't played as good in the last 2 years. In fact, it's quite the opposite, because Bronny's improved his gameplay over the past year or so. An improved passer, a very versatile scorer, and can defend at a high level too. So what's the issue? Why has his stock fallen? Well, it's something that's just not in his hands. Over the last 2 years, somehow Bronny has only added an inch to his height, which isn't impressive at all. His early spurt of growth was crucial in getting him the plaudits he deserved, but the fact is, none of the top 28 picks in June's NBA draft was 6'3" or less, and that could be an issue when he finally enters the draft. He's got a high basketball IQ, but making it in the NBA as a defensively minded wing and only being 6'3" might be a big problem. And where could the father-son duo play? LeBron has repeatedly mentioned that he'd play wherever Bronny is at, and the most recent mention came in February. This obviously indicated LeBron's intention of playing with his son, and he wouldn't mind moving to any franchise that ends up signing Bronny, but we think the Boston Celtics might be a problem. But realistically speaking, the Lakers have a real chance of signing Bronny, and it's an opportunity they should consider. They've got a G League team, and bringing Bronny a year earlier could be a possibility considering that Bronny can't play in the NBA until 2024 at the earliest. LeBron has been in talks to potentially extend his contract with the Lakers, and if they really want him to stay for another couple of years, they might have to please the king and sign his son when the time comes. And it's fairly simple too, because if the Lakers want LeBron to stay, then they wouldn't mind signing Bronny, and he'd be cheap too because G League draft picks are bargains. And they'll probably end up having to use a draft pick too, because keeping Bronny in the G League means that LeBron could still hypothetically play with Bronny, but we don't think his ideal plan includes a return from a sprained ankle and having to play with his son while rehabbing. He also wants to do it in the NBA, and the Lakers would need to keep Bronny around long enough to pick him in the NBA draft. Also, it isn't a foolproof plan. Just because we're mentioning all this, it doesn't mean that this plan is entirely foolproof. In fact, quite the opposite. We can all agree that Bronny's potential as a player is uncertain as it gets, but signing Bronny means that teams get a package deal, and the other part of the package is way too good to pass up, as we talked about. So there's a decent chance that when Bronny becomes a part of the NBA draft, there will be many teams looking at the possibility of signing him up, even if they don't believe in his potential. That's because they want the other part of the package, and that's not entirely selfish, is it? In fact, it might even make sense to use one of the earlier picks on a player like Bronny because it's guaranteeing the signing of LeBron James along with Bronny, and that's an impressive bargain. And if he somehow survives until the late round of picks, the situation becomes fantastic for the franchises with the late picks because they can use their pick on Bronny. What it will do is transform you into the frontrunner for LeBron James. And not only that, if somehow James decides not to sign for your franchise, you can always sell him for more than his worth to the Lakers. It's a win-win situation. Finally, how does it end? For now, it seems straightforward and simple. A LeBron-Bronny season would probably be the best thing to happen to LeBron's career, and it wouldn't matter if Bronny is a superstar or whether LeBron is still as good at 40 as he is now. For a father, there could be nothing better than watching his son follow in his footsteps and play with him at the biggest level. But let's not forget that there's a certain Bryce James, LeBron's second oldest son. He might only be 15 years old, but he's already 6'6", and as per Brian Windhorst of ESPN, coaches consider him to be a bigger talent than Bronny. In fact, he seems almost as tall as his father, and he's still got so much growing to do. 7 feet might be out of the question, but 6'10" is a realistic possibility. So let's cancel the Bronny schemes. Wait for the number 1 pick in the 2026 NBA draft, because Bronny might just be the promised kid. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think LeBron and Bronny will end up playing in the NBA together? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.